I have a small favor to ask that takes you literally a few seconds. If you like the first 100 podcasts and the guests that we have invited so far, can you do me a small favor and give us a thumbs up on any podcast platform that you are listening on? It helps the podcast more than you think, because the higher we go on the ranking, the more interesting guests we can invite. Thank you again for your support. This episode is brought to you by Blocks, the no-code platform that's changing how founders, engineers, and product managers build and ship software. Blocks is like a back-end platform on steroids. With its built-in database and an impressive suite of features, Blocks lets you create workflows, actions, triggers, events, schedulers, and more. You can even handle authentication and notification, all without writing a single line of code. Whether you're building a complex enterprise application or just need to ship an API quickly, Blocks has you covered. It's the fastest way to go from idea to launch. Check out Blocks today on blocks.online. That's www.blocks.online, and build your next project smarter, not harder. Quick introduction for our listener. James Hawkins is the co-founder of PostHog, which is an open source product analytics platform that lets developers track products usage, understand the impact of new features, and integrate product and user data with their warehouses. All without, of course, sending any data to a third party. You've raised to date around 27 million from Y Combinator, Continuity Fund, and Google Ventures, just to name a few. And you have an impressive 99,000 users on your platform, out of which around 2,000 have just signed up last week, which is very impressive. James, take us back to your early childhood days. Did you exhibit any signs of entrepreneurship early on?
I actually don't think I did. I was very intense as a child, but that would go in whatever direction I picked. So, for example, I think at about the age of probably like 13, I actually decided I should do the opposite. I should have one of the most like institutionalized careers ever. And I was like, I'm going to be an investment banker. And I just got like straight A's, did as many subjects as possible, got into like the best university I could, went off in this direction. By the time I finally got there, my attention moved on to something totally different. And I actually spent 10 years trying to do cycling professionally. So then I did that, and then kind of got into, I was pretty bad at it. Like I was good for like a normal person, but I was bad for a professional. And I used to do web development stuff on the side to make a little bit of cash because I wasn't earning much doing cycling. And that's kind of how I fell into technology. Not really, but the intensity certainly has been there for a long time.
Amazing that you mentioned that you've been professional for 10 years, but you're very transparent about not being good at it. But what have you learned over that 10-year period that you brought with you to your entrepreneurship world?
I think it's kind of a different perspective where people complain about working hard or whatever, and you haven't really worked hard unless like in sport, working hard is just orders of magnitude harder than when you're sat at like at the end of the day, you're sat at a computer, no matter how stressed you're getting if you're building software. Whereas on a bike, you could be like in the mountains in the rain with like 3 more hours of cycling to go, or you've fallen off and like broken something or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think doing something very physical like that shows you that it just gives you a slightly bigger perspective on how hard things really can get.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that story. Bring us back a little bit forward to PostHog. So how did PostHog come into fruition?
So my co-founder and I had a series of terrible ideas. PostHog is the 6th one that we worked on over the course of 6 months. So we were like, well, we think a good startup, pre-product market fit, is like a machine that tests ideas quickly. So that's really what we built. So I would like smash out the website, or do all the do some marketing, do the sales. And my co-founder would build something, and we kind of realized we're pretty terrible at validating ideas up front. And I think almost everyone is, unless you're a really superb product manager, the likes of whom I've never met, to that level. And so for most people, it's like, okay, you need to validate these ideas, but we validated them by getting them out the door in like a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and just getting them in people's hands. We'd do whatever we could along the way to steer a little bit. But yeah, we built all these ideas, and all of them failed for a bunch of different reasons. But every single time we had to set up a stack of tools to understand our user behavior. And eventually we're like, instead of like, let's solve that problem instead and build like we're both I've got like some engineering background, some sales background, some marketing background, and my co-founder's very technical. And so we're like, oh, let's build, like, to start with, just product analytics, but for developers. And we're going to absolutely build like the dream version of this for an engineer. We did exactly that. We spent 4 weeks on the first version of the product, building it, put it on Hacker News, which is a popular website for developers. It was on the front page, and since then we've been a completely inbound business, and we've signed up. And the number at the start, it's like like just under 100,000 companies installed PostHog since then. So everything just suddenly took off. Suddenly we went from like a push basis of me like harassing people on LinkedIn who would generally ignore me and maybe getting like 2 meetings booked a day to way too much demand for us to service. And it's always felt like that, where we're just getting feature requests, bug reports, people wanting us to build things, trying to keep up with what's happening.
Amazing. If you can decipher it a little bit and explain it to an 8-year-old. So the developer is your ideal customer profile, and they're using your product. What are they actually getting out of it?
Sure. So a lot. We are aiming to provide every single product that you need to build a software product yourself. So at the moment we have about 9 products. So we help people understand, like, if you're building software, we help you know like how many users you have, which features they're having, which is product analytics. We let you watch video clips of your users using your stuff, which is session replay. We let you release changes. Like when you change something, we let you roll it out carefully to a handful of users at first with feature flags. You can do experiments where you can ship one version to one user, another version to another, and see if it impacts like how many people are signing up, for example. We have surveys, so you can pop up in your product like, hey, what do you think of this thing? Give me a score, give me some feedback. Or here's my calendar link to book a meeting with me to talk about it. We have a warehouse, so you can like join your product data with your revenue data from Stripe or stuff that's in your database to do deeper analysis, and then kind of BI on top of that. Much more that we're currently working on. So anyway, we have like a whole bunch of web analytics as well. So we help you track your website in the same way that Google Analytics would do. But the whole lot's just in one spot. Every single product is cheaper than the cheapest major competitor, and there's zero integration needed because they're all in the same place. So that's kind of what we help people with.
Amazing. On your website, which is beautifully designed, anyone who's listening to this podcast should go to posthog.com and check the beautiful design. You also have a very interesting blog where you write a lot of nice articles. One of them caught my eye, which is you're breaking down your ideal customer profile by revenue, by size, by role, by need, and then who's the person you're going after. And obviously, as you said, your power user probably is a product engineer, the technical founder, people who are tech savvy, like a product manager running this. So you've honed the ICP. Now the question is, where do you find those early on?
So, yeah, I think there's two big steps we took. Step one was we had to figure out if anyone cared about this thing. I mean, in our mind, we were building for kind of a developer as a hypothesis. We did not know. So that was step one. It was like, okay, we built this open source project, shipped it, and then we started getting a lot of inbound. But there was a huge variety of people who were trying out our software. Loads of them would churn. Our retention was bad. The product was terrible. It was really buggy. Missed loads of features. Like the range of people using it, we'd literally have like a chain, like a international bank would sign up, and then the next sign up would be like a chain of like a chain of 3 pizza restaurants in a random city in Eastern Europe, for example. And then it would be like an indie developer, and then it would be like a marketing person, and it was all over the place. So it's quite unusual. Like in the early days with our other products that failed, like it was 1-to-1. Like I would be messaging someone trying to get them to use it, so I would control it. With PostHog, I think because we built something that started generating inbound interest, the problem wasn't that no one is talking to us, is that there's a lot of people talking to us, but we don't know who to listen to. And we wasted a ton of time not trying to narrow it down and just sort of randomly servicing everyone. To understand our ideal customer profile, which turned out to be probably the most important thing we ever did once we'd launched, we tried to figure out our business model. So the first year and a half, we focused on open source, which is unusual and not something I'd recommend perhaps now. I can go into why, but long and short of it is we built this open source project. And then we're like, okay, let's figure out the business model. Like, how do we generate revenue to make everything sustainable so we're not reliant on investors? And so dedicated myself to doing sales whilst everyone else at the company was building stuff. Basically, it was just me and loads of engineers. And I started talking to customers. But what I did was I created a paid version of our product. And every time I talked to someone about it, I basically put them in a big spreadsheet. So I had like all these different customers that I was talking with down in one column. I then tracked I then had all these attributes I was interested in, and they're very specific. So it's not just like companies between 500 and 2,000 employees in the car insurance industry or something, but it would be things like what role does the person have I'm talking to? But it would also be things like, have they used our free product already? Have they got a data warehouse set up? Do they have a centralized data team at their company? So there'd be very specific kind of behaviors as opposed to like sweeping generalizations of who they are. And then what happened was I scored everyone on all these attributes, going, hey, that's like a 5 out of 5 for how strongly I would agree with that statement for this person. This is a 1 out of 5 or whatever. And then what happened was, as I was trying to sell to them, some deals would sell. And most deals don't qualify out, really. They kind of float around and nothing happens. And so it was almost as important to track the deals that just floated about as well as the ones that went through. Because then we could start, because you're going to get more data, because most people, tragically, will not buy from you. And so by actually generating the anti-persona, it helped us figure out what the persona was that we were targeting. And so we would, and it really obviously to me, once we did this exercise, we're like, oh, like we're really terrible at dealing with non-technical people. Like if it's like a non-technical product manager trying to buy our software, we basically fail almost every time. There's a big culture mismatch. Like our products are just a little bit more technical to use. They're just oriented towards an engineer in so many ways. And we realized, hey, we just have to talk to engineering every time. So in the future, and there are so many things we changed off the back of going, hey, we can completely focus on engineers from looking at what's happening here, amongst a bunch of other things. But yeah, kind of just get it in a spreadsheet, but track the ones that sell and the ones that don't sell, score them all, and then just like look at it, and it's probably going to be kind of obvious. I think we only, maybe once we'd spoken to, had about 30 deals or something, you start getting a picture of what's happening. But that system, that probably, as soon as we got that down, our growth totally rocketed, basically.
Amazing. So now we understand how you looked at the ICP and figured out where's your sweet spot. How did you start generating that much of inbound leads early on? What channels did you focus on? How did the organic thing happen? Because there should be some trigger from your side to activate, especially when the brand is not known early on.
So that last point you make was one of the things I really had in mind. So I was like, okay, we're two idiots with no brand recognition whatsoever. We're outsiders. We've never built big companies before or anything. How do we do this? Like we've never been we're not from Silicon Valley originally. We did do Y Combinator, which gives us some credibility. So I was like, okay, how do I fundamentally build trust with a user? And I was like, okay, I think being really transparent will build trust. So instead of kind of hiding who we are, like let's just lean into it and let's just like totally write, let's just try and write as much about who we are and what we're trying to build as possible. So we built this big kind of public handbook. And we did this before we launched. Like this is, as my co-founder was building the product and I was dealing with the users a little bit, I started just building a handbook that documented not just like how our products work, but like how we work. And go, hey, like we're gonna have a paid product one day. This is what it will look like. This is why we built this in the first place. This is kind of the story. So we were just really intensely, authentically ourselves early on. And the design was a lot crappier at the start than it was at the end, than it is now. So that was, I think, one big thing. The second, I guess, is we looked at. I considered, okay, so what would put me off? Basically, I ran a pre-mortem. So it's like, how would this go wrong? If I were a user, why would I not sign up to this thing? And even if a product's free, it's not, because you have to put time into it, you have to send it data. So I think trust is one thing, but I also just like looked at pattern recognition as in like, okay, what do I associate with mature companies? And what does every mature company have in common? And one of the things that's tiny is like, if you go on their website, they'll have a massive footer with all this crap in it. And we're like, we should just have a big footer with loads of stuff in it. Rather, because often with startups, you see they create a one-page landing page launch thing, and you click about and it just scrolls you down to the page to like the third strip of content. And to me, that just screams like, okay, this probably isn't secure. It probably won't work very well. They'll probably work on something different in 3 days' time anyway. So like, I'm not going to put time into it. So I wanted to come across as like, this is more well thought out. There's a game plan here. I can kind of believe in this, even if we're not lying and pretending we're 100 people. But I was trying to give confidence in who we are and what we're trying to achieve a little bit more. I think those are sort of like, those are the absolute early starting points of building some trust. Like the other thing I guess we did is we spent 4 weeks before we launched it properly on the internet, where we kind of really we put it on Hacker News, which is where we started this wild increase in traffic. In those 4 weeks, really importantly, because we had no trust, like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, I was like, okay, I need to get, my friends will use this, even if no one else does. And so I'm like, hey, I've got a product. It's pretty useless at the moment. As a favor, could we build it attached to your product? I just want to make sure that we're building in production for someone versus doing this in isolation. because it surfaces all kinds of edge cases as soon as like your product makes contact with a user. And we do that all the time now when we ship new products as early as possible. And so in the first week, I had a couple of friends who were like, yeah, you can build this and track events on my website. We also attached it to some of our previous failed products. We kind of built product analytics for those because they had a couple of users. That ironed out a lot of the edge cases. The other thing we did was we tested self-serve. So because we thought we were going to build for developers, one thing that developers don't like is hopping on quick calls with salespeople. And so I was like, okay, let's make sure that developers can sign up and try it without having to talk to anyone. So we made a self-serve kind of flow to get started. And I wanted to test it with some people that weren't friendly faces. So after maybe 2 weeks of building it, we spent $2,000 on ads on Twitter, where we just advertised the open source repo just to try and get like a little bit of usage. Again, it wasn't a channel with a view to scaling that. It was actually just to check that people could get into the product successfully, and we'd probably iron out a few more bugs and stuff. It also helped us get in GitHub, when you do an open source project, you have GitHub stars. If a project has no stars, you know it's immature, and we're like, okay, can we just get to like 50 or 100 stars or something before it launches so it doesn't look totally new? Again, it's just a signal that like someone is using this. So it helped us give a little bit of social proof before like the first users from Hacker News found it. So those are the sorts of things we did in the first couple of weeks that I think helped a lot with when we then launched properly, which wasn't that much later. We kind of were able to make the most of it. Like the very first user was like, hey, I've still got a screenshot of it somewhere. He's like, login doesn't work, kind of thing. And it's like, that would be a shame if we're trying to fix the login whilst it's on the front page of a popular website, for example. Crucially though, don't wait too long. Like we only spent 4 weeks doing this. We didn't spend like 12 months trying to perfect everything to find out no one cares or whatever.
Amazing. I mean, you talk about the self-service, and we have thousands of articles online on product-led growth strategies, on how to put the product out there and it grows by itself. If you were to summarize like 3 key ingredients you've utilized that were successful in people adopting the self-service model, what advice would you share with us?
So I think I'll probably go straight into the least expected thing, which I read lots of books on marketing strategies and whatever, and they're quite growth hacky. And some of them sound extremely convincing when you read them because they often have case studies of some company that did something really clever. Our growth strategy has not been very clever. It's been very simple, and so maybe therefore it is clever. But really simplistically, when people started turning up, we just asked them, why did you show up? And first of all, why did you show up? And we realized, everyone it's word of mouth is where these first trickle of users are coming from. Like the ones outside of like the people that came from like the paid ads. And this is kind of once we launched on Hacker News. And then the follow-up question was like, why, if it's word of mouth, like why did you get recommended PostHog? And they basically just fell into like a few they would just repeat the same like 3 or 4 things over and over again. And for us, like today, it's like low prices, all the tools in one, developer brand, and support from technical people. And literally our whole growth strategy is we do those 4 things as hard as we can. So it's like I'm actively cutting our pricing over time. And like we've just made like up to 90% price reductions for our 2 biggest revenue driving products. Developer brand, like we're getting strong, more and more strongly opinionated. I think a lot of people get this wrong. I think a lot of people see like developer brand as like cute animal logos and stuff, and they're like, oh, you have cute hedgehogs. It's like, I think what's actually worked is giving them a personality. So it's like, no, you can't, like, we're not aiming for cute and trying to sort of placate everyone. Like, we're going to make this kind of divisive. Like, we're going to kind of mock big enterprise approach. Like, we're going to mock, like, kind of bureaucracy in corporates and a lot of things that we want to cut through. A lot of what PostHog does is the whole company mission is to equip every developer to build successful products. And we think getting rid of a lot of the bureaucracy and lots of unnecessary roles and organizations and stuff can really help that. Like, we want developers connect to their users as tightly as possible. So we've had like quite opinionated branding throughout, and we produce a lot of content that's very opinionated, and then we share how we work. We have like only have people who've got engineering experience in support, and we got to 100,000 users before we had any support people outside of our engineers, for example. And we built more and more products, and today we have 8 or 9. We're going to build more than 50 over the next like several years. So, simplistically, like find out why people are showing up and just do more of those things, and that got us like way past like 10 million run rate. It got us past like 200,000 users signed up, and there wasn't any magic. Like we didn't do some sort of like weird SEO thing or something, which is like kind of not what I expected. I thought it would be like, oh, we'll do something with like programmatic SEO or something super smart. We just didn't need to. And then the cool thing is we've just then, I guess the like other thing that's been important to us is we've been quite patient. We haven't, I guess the second thing I would sort of advise maybe here is it's very tempting to focus on revenue above everything else. Like how much money is your startup making is a very important signal, but that is an output. When we make users happy, we have realized we will just make money somehow or another. It's good. It's like making money is the easy bit if you can make people truly happy with what you're offering. Again, that might be selection bias. Like only build products that have competition. We don't build products that don't have competition, because for me personally, like what's easier? Is it easier to come up with the concept of some new thing that has never before existed, or is it easier to go, hey, here's here's a wallet, could you create a better version of this? And you probably could. Like, oh, it should be bigger, it should have like extra pockets, or like a place to put my like coins. Our first 5 products that my co-founder and I worked on were all brand new concepts, and all of them failed. And it was actually, we realized we're really good executing. Like, we're good at marketing, we're good at branding, we're good at building stuff very fast. And so we realized our strength is actually like doing a better job than what's already there, and by having everything in one place. So I think that might be why the commercial side has been easier, because like we're going into places where we know there are budgets, people spend tons of money on their analytics stack. Our job is to do a much better job than everyone else and to beat them, versus finding a new budget that's never before existed or something. So yeah, I think you need to stress more about revenue if you're building like a blue water, blue sky thing that isn't a product concept that's ever existed. If you're fighting other people and there is money, you actually don't need to worry as much about revenue, but you have to worry much more about what it's like for a user and being the best at that thing. And the differentiation kind of comes into play more heavily.
Makes a lot of sense, the way you're approaching it. And you mentioned that you're shipping products very fast. What type of framework or tactics do you currently use to ship fast?
Quite a few. So the whole company, I think the first thing is we asked ourselves, are we winning on, what does the company win on? What's the single thing that is most important to us? And it is shipping speed. That comes, I know you're saying like our website is cool, it has nice design. And we actually asked, like, are we winning on design? And the answer is no. Like, we do design iteratively and quickly, and it really helps. But across at least our app that we provide, it's absolutely about shipping speed. So how we've got quick, there's a lot of things that go into it. The too long didn't read is very high autonomy, very high trust, and we hire people that can work well in that sort of environment. In more depth, what that looks like is step 1, the company explains what it cares about very transparently. Like, you can read our handbook publicly about our strategy, you can see our roadmap, you can see what we're thinking and how we operate. You can't be autonomous as an employee if you've got information being hidden from you. You're going to make poor choices. So I don't want to hide information for people that work here. Nearly all of it we make public anyway to kind of make a point of this, and it builds trust with the users when we share. It gets us more users, gets us more buzz, which helps. I think the second thing is, from autonomy perspective, I think you can either scale the business through, you can basically like control people more when you add more people, like if you go from no employees to like 10 or to 100, or you can basically just trust people. Really good engineers, I do not believe want to be micromanaged and told what to do. So I think, and that happens in an awful lot of organizations where sales will sell a deal and here's the contract and it's missing 10 features. Those go into a roadmap that's looked at by a product manager who then gives the product requirement stock to an engineer. And they tell engineers, your job is not to think why you're building the thing you're building, it is just to build the thing and think how. But for an engineer, that's not empowering, because like, a lot of the time, and one of the things we felt from previous experience and from user interviews is engineers were building things they didn't understand why they were even working on them in the first place. And that correlated, we thought, with stronger engineers. And so we're like, actually, people are engineers for a reason, because I think often they are better problem solvers than people who aren't engineers, if I'm being really blunt. And like, they're the ones who've gone that extra mile to learn how to, I'm saying this as a really, really bad engineer, but a good engineers they're extremely good at problem solving, like more so than an average employee, I would say, for another role. And that's why they've become engineers. They figured out how to like use Kubernetes or Python or whatever else. So our engineers decide what to build, not me. So if I think we should build feature X and they want to build feature Y, we absolutely are going to build feature Y at PostHog, and I will fully trust them and back them to do that, and they have repeatedly proven me wrong. Most of our most important things have come from an engineer building something that I didn't think was a good idea. The whole reason we're multi-product, which is the most important part of our product strategy, is because an engineer at PostHog decided to build our second product. And I was like, hey, the second product I think is dumb, I think it's cheap, I don't think anyone will use it, and it just took off. And because he was dealing directly with users, He's an engineer. He's pretty close to our ideal customer like we are our own ideal customer profile. We're pretty close to it. So yeah. And the other thing is we hire people with like lots of experience rather than less. We have fewer but better paid people is more our model for engineering. And we're all remote. So we're bad at getting a very junior developer up to scratch. Like we don't have like a big training program or something. Our training is pretty much like we think you'll develop by working with really strong people, but we aren't going to be able to spoon feed people through. And like we're trying to build like $100 billion plus business, and so we just are not going to realistically have space for this. And we're willing to pay a premium for people with more experience. We hire a lot of quite entrepreneurial developers who are quite well rounded, who've like run startups before or been CTO and want to just write code. And the other one is we have a really strong individual contributor culture. So all of the managers at PostHog are pretty much all of them are very reluctant to be managers. And like often managers don't want to be a manager at PostHog without asked to swap with someone on their team. Has like repeatedly happened. We don't pay any more money if you're managing other people, and so the managers are all very technical too. We don't kind of reward the fact that you're like the boss of other people, and we kind of talk down about it almost internally, and it kind of has meant that it's about shipping stuff. It is more chaotic but at a higher speed, and it's very rare we ship something twice by accident or really go in the wrong direction anyway by doing a good job being transparent. So that's like a lot of quite jumbled thoughts but there's an awful lot that goes into being fast.
No, absolutely. I think what makes your strategy successful is that your engineers are actually also close to the customer. They're getting the feedback, they're using that feedback, they understand the pain points, and then they're essentially acting like a product manager indirectly, which adds a lot of value to the whole process.
Yeah, so to put it really bluntly, the way we frame it is there's no product by default and there's no product design by default either. A product like we have got 2 product managers at PostHog, but they don't decide what the roadmap is. The engineers do. They just give context. So as an engineer, you could talk to a product manager and say, hey, I need help. Or you could ignore them and just ship the thing you think is the right thing to ship. And we'll trust you to make the right choice. And it's the same with design. So for example, with product design, we just trust our engineers to decide if they should talk. We have a designer who's extremely talented and they could talk to him, or they can just ship it without him. And again, I'll just trust them to make the right call, and based on how comfortable they are, how complicated the thing is, and how much the design even matters of what they're working on. But it won't be that they default into some QA process that gets very slow, and then they're kind of fighting the designer, and then they have 5 pull requests open at the same time as each other, and then they start context switching and doing meetings and alignment or whatever. So yeah, it's a very low meeting. Like we have no meetings on Tuesdays or Thursdays, but even on the other days, a lot of engineers have no meetings either. So really try to strip out all the bureaucracy from the organization.
What's the principle that you live by that has served you well on your journey?
I think people get institutionalized very easily. I think we're kind of built to be institutionalized almost. It's probably like to survive as cave people or whatever. You probably had to stick with your tribe to be alive, because like someone has to like cook the food while someone like goes out and hunts for meat or whatever else. And I think humans have a tendency to do this. One of the things I think we've been pretty good at is going, oh, actually, like stepping out of what is going on. Like we're in control of what we're doing here. We can pick what we would like to do. And there are a few things that are important here. One is that to build a really large company, it will take a long time. We want to build a large company, so we should acknowledge this will take a long time, so I should make sure it's somewhere that I can work at for a very, very long time. So sometimes we'll make decisions based on what we want to do versus what is perhaps most optimal for revenue. Because like in the long run, this is better for revenue anyway. It's like deferring kind of focus there. For example, in the early days, we thought perhaps we'll have more of an enterprise focus than we wound up having. And we're like, actually, we just don't want to do this yet. Like a product-led, like inbound model is way more fun for us to work on. We want to have enterprises come to us versus like putting on suits and traveling out to them wherever they are in the world. And we have the same sort of model with investors and stuff too. Like we don't try hard with investors. We've designed the company to not need investment, which makes it way easier if we do want to fundraise, which we just don't, because we don't need to. With enterprises, we'll take an enterprise if it comes in, but we won't go out to try to sell to one that we're not dealing with already. And if the deal that's crappy, we just won't sell it. We don't need the revenue to run the business because we have strong growth from small businesses or like like Series B plus tech companies that are growing quickly, that actually have high volumes and spend a lot of money with us. So we really kind of designed, like design for me is like, it's not just a brand or whatever. It's like, have we structured the game? Let's pick the sport that we're playing here. Like just because you're playing American football one day as your startup, doesn't mean you have to be playing it the next day. We can step out and change direction and stuff. So yeah, trying to really make sure that like we're in control, like just recognizing that you're in control of much more than you probably will by default. Like, hey, actually, we can do multi-product. Like, this is great. Or, well, yeah, I don't know, just like you can break some of the rules that everyone seems to think are proper rules that people have told you are rules, like actually a lot of them are just not true. Like, for example, you should have OKRs. I think this is a bad idea for startups. I think there are other ways of doing goal setting from first principles that we can design. Or like in sales, we don't do outbound sales at all. From first principles, I'm like, well, most deals don't sell. Sales is really inefficient. If we can get really good at inbound, we just look at what's already working and we just do that stuff harder. Now we're just dealing with people that want to deal with us, which means that we don't need lots of salespeople, so we can build more products, because like we can have way more investment now in the engineering team. So the engineering team, like until this year, we only had 2 people in sales, but they're just servicing people that are coming inbound, kind of actively trying to buy things from us. We've started ramping it for other reasons, doing cross-sell now, and we're just getting more sales assist, but at a much higher, like we have like nearly 2,000 companies a week signing up at this point.
Amazing. I mean, we can go all day because this is a very enjoyable conversation, but I want to be mindful of your time. One last question, what's next for PostHog?
We have many more products to build. We have at least 50 more we need to ship. So we're trying to work out how do we've basically cranked up the willingness to risk take in terms of new product development. I think we were a little bit frightened. We've built products that are pretty close together before. Like we built product analytics, session recording, feature flags. We've got error tracking coming out pretty soon. They're all very connected to a product being developed. But we've considered like, well, to make your product successful, like you need to sell it to people, you need to market it and so on. So we shipped like web analytics to see if marketing people would start, or if PostHog would be used for marketing use cases. And that's been really successful. So we're like, oh, we can build then more of the marketing stack of tools. And again, because we get in with engineering, we're just in ahead of every other role. So we can kind of be the default for all the software that a startup would use. And we're thinking the same in like customer support. Like actually, engineers do support in the early days. So we could just build the support tool for them because we'll have like their analytics data and their error tracking and session recordings and whatever else. And like, there's no reason we can see to like not build a CRM, for example. Again, we're not building Salesforce. We're building an alternative to using nothing. So yeah, we're just getting more aggressive with the breadth. Again, because users are telling us they like us because we have all the tools in one, so we should build more of them. So really simple, more products.
Amazing. Thank you very much for joining the show, James. How can people reach you, and are you hiring?
Sure. Yeah, we're hiring pretty much all the time. So generally, if you're kind of technical by background but interested in any role in an organization, you could be a good fit. Probably Twitter is a good place. Just James406.
We put that all in the show notes. We wish you the best of luck, James. Thank you for stopping by.
I have a small favor to ask that takes you literally a few seconds. If you like the first 100 podcasts and the guests that we have invited so far, can you do me a small favor and give us a thumbs up on any podcast platform that you are listening on? It helps the podcast more than you think, because the higher we go on the ranking, the more interesting guests we can invite. Thank you again for your support.
Thank you so much for listening to the first 100. We hope it inspired you in your journey. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify, and share it with a friend starting their entrepreneurship journey. Leave us a 5-star review. Your support will help spread our podcast to more viewers.